Kobe Bryant passed away at just 41 years old, too young for a legend to have to stop, and too soon for the world to witness the chapter of life he was beginning to write after basketball. On the day the helicopter crashed into the hills of Calabasas, people did not only lose one of the greatest players in NBA history, they lost a father who was learning how to slow down beside his 4 daughters. They lost a man who had left the court, but had not left behind his creative ambition. And most painfully of all, the world also lost the vision of Kobe sitting beside Gianna for many more years, watching her grow up, play basketball, and ask her father what to do when she felt out of rhythm on the court. That death left the entire world silent, not only because Kobe had won so much, but because he still had so many things he had not yet had the chance to become. To understand how vast that emptiness was, we have to return to the boy who once dribbled a basketball until he fell asleep in an empty room. We have to walk through the missed shots in front of the crowd, the training sessions while others were still asleep, the championship rings, the cracks in his reputation, and the moments when his body was worn down to the point that it could almost no longer withstand the will inside it. Kobe Bryant did not simply want to win. He lived as if every day was another confrontation with himself. Had he given everything? Had he gone as far as he possibly could? Had he been worthy of the gift he had been given? And that is why, when he left, the question that remained was not only what Kobe had achieved, but who he still could have become if his life had not closed too soon. Kobe Bean Bryant was born on August 23, 1978, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, into a family where basketball was not some distant dream, but almost the very air they breathed. His father, Joe Jellybean Bryant, had played in the NBA for the Philadelphia 76ers before continuing his career in Europe. Because of that, Kobe did not enter basketball like a child who happened to find a ball outside on the court. He was born almost right beside it. When other children still saw basketball as a game, Kobe already saw it as a language of its own. At the age of 3, that little boy had already begun playing. From very early on, Kobe was fascinated by the Los Angeles Lakers, the team that would later not only give him his career, but also become the place he built, broke, and then redefined himself. But the road that led Kobe to the Lakers did not begin in Hollywood, nor did it begin under the lights of the NBA. It began much farther away, in an unfamiliar Italy, where an American boy had to learn how to grow up among small basketball courts, practice gyms far from home, and the feeling that he did not fully belong anywhere. When Kobe was 6 years old, the Bryant family moved to Italy because Joe Bryant continued playing professional basketball there. For many children, that could have been a rupture, leaving home, changing languages, changing friends, changing the entire familiar world. For Kobe, it became a special kind of school. He learned Italian, adapted to a new way of life, observed more than he spoke, and gradually formed a very particular kind of solitude. That boy did not grow up inside the noisy American basketball system, where young talents were praised early. Kobe grew up on the edge of that center, watching the NBA from afar through videotapes his grandfather sent over. It was that distance that made Kobe different. He did not watch games only for entertainment. He rewound them again and again, studying every footstep, every shot, every way the stars handled the ball. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, NBA games, from the other side of the ocean, all of it became the private curriculum of a child no one knew yet. While many people learned basketball through direct collisions on American courts, Kobe learned it through memory, through observation, through a patience that was almost obsessive. There is one very small image that seemed to foreshadow almost his entire destiny. Kobe often served as the ball boy for his father's team. During halftime, when the older players went into the locker room, young Kobe would rush onto the court, grab the ball, and shoot, not to perform for anyone, not to be praised, simply because he could not stand still when, in front of him, there was an empty court and a basket. Someone on the team once recalled that every halftime almost turned into a kabuki show because they had to chase that little boy off the court so the game could continue. Before the world called him the Black Mamba, those small courts in Italy had already seen one thing very clearly. Kobe Bryant did not know how to leave the game. At the age of 13, Kobe returned to Philadelphia. If Italy gave him solitude and the habit of observation, America gave him his first real test. Basketball in America was faster, stronger, and more competitive. Doubts began to appear. People could admit that Kobe had played well in Italy, but they were not sure that this boy was strong enough to stand firm among talents who had grown up inside the American basketball environment. From childhood to Kobe, that was not a warning, it was fuel. He did not return to Philadelphia simply to fit in. He returned with a feeling that he needed to prove something, that the years spent far from the center of American basketball had not made him fall behind, that the boy who learned basketball through videotapes could still surpass those who had been forged in a harsher environment, that he was not a fragile exception but a real opponent. From very early on, Kobe carried that kind of mindset inside him, not waiting for anyone's recognition, not asking anyone to open a path, only quietly turning other people's doubt into pressure he placed upon himself. Kobe Bryant's childhood, therefore, was not a peaceful story about a talent prepared in advance for glory. It was the story of a child far from home, learning basketball from a distance, growing up between two worlds, and always feeling that he had to prove he belonged in the harshest place of all. Before there were championship rings, before there was Mamba Mentality, before the entire NBA had to fear the cold look in his eyes, Kobe was already the boy standing in the middle of an empty basketball court in Italy, refusing to leave while the ball was still in his hands. When Kobe Bryant returned to Philadelphia, he was no longer the boy who had only learned basketball through videotapes sent from the other side of the ocean. This time, he had to step into a real environment, where no one cared how well you had played in Italy. No one made way for you, just because your father had once been a professional player, and even fewer people believed that a teenager who had just returned from Europe could dominate American high school basketball. Lower Merion High School was where Kobe began that battle, but the team he walked into was nothing like a perfect launching pad. In his first year, Lower Merion won only 4 games and lost as many as 20. For many young players, that could have been a sign that they were in the wrong place. For Kobe, it became a test. He was not placed onto an already strong team to benefit from existing glory. He had to pull a losing group upward through his own talent, work ethic, and an ego that refused to bow its head. From there, Kobe began changing the atmosphere around Lower Merion. As each season passed, the thin, tall teenager with eyes that always seemed to be calculating did not simply score more points. He made people come to watch. As a junior, Kobe averaged around 31 points and 10 rebounds per game and won Pennsylvania Player of the Year. The early doubts gradually changed their tone. The boy from Italy was no longer being asked whether he could keep up with American basketball. People began asking, just how far could he go? The answer came in his senior year of high school. Lower Merion had not won a state championship in more than half a century. 53 years is long enough for a dream to become an old story, long enough for generations of students to pass through without still believing their team could touch the top. But Kobe did not look at history that way. To him, a thirst that had lasted that long only made the moment of ending it more valuable. The 1996 state championship game did not open like a fairy tale. Kobe's was defended tightly. He turned the ball over. He missed shots. In those early minutes, everything seemed to be reminding him that the big stage was never easy, even for someone called one of the top talents in America. But Kobe did not disappear from the game. He stayed inside the pressure, reread the rhythm of the game, and found ways to affect it with everything he had: steals, rebounds, assists, and then points when the moment came. Lower Merion ultimately won the championship, ending 53 years of waiting. That was not just a high school title. It was the first time Kobe Bryant showed the public something that would repeat throughout his career. He could start badly. He could be suffocated. He could be pushed into a difficult position, but it was very rare for him to let a game end without finding a way to leave his fingerprints on it. After that championship, Kobe stood before the path most young talents still chose: go to college, mature step by step, let the American basketball system polish his name for a few more years before entering the NBA. But Kobe was not built for the safe road. He did not want to wait until other people decided he was ready enough. He wanted to face the best players in the world immediately. And when he announced that he would skip college and go straight into the NBA, Kobe turned his own future into a public gamble. That decision caused intense controversy. A high school guard, only 17 years old, who had not played a single minute in the NCAA, wanted to step directly into the toughest league on the planet. Many people thought he was rushing. Some believed he needed more time, but Kobe heard those things in his own way. To him, doubt was not a wall. It was the starting whistle. The 1996 NBA draft brought Kobe Bryant to a strange moment. On paper, the Charlotte Hornets selected him with the 13th pick, but behind that was a plan the Los Angeles Lakers had already prepared. Jerry West, a man with a cold, sharp eye for talent, had seen in Kobe something not everyone dared to believe in. During the pre-draft workout, Kobe stunned those who watched not only because of his skills, but because of the almost unreasonable confidence of a teenager. He did not behave like a boy asking for an opportunity. He stepped onto the court as if that opportunity had always belonged to him. The trade was completed. Charlotte selected Kobe, and then he was sent to the Los Angeles Lakers. A childhood dream suddenly became reality, but the reality of the NBA was not as gentle as the dream. That same summer, the Lakers signed Shaquille O'Neal, a giant center, a force almost impossible to stop. From that very moment, the Lakers held two pieces of an era in their hands. Shaq was overwhelming power. Kobe was young, sharp-edged ambition. They could build a dynasty together. They also had enough ego to collide with each other along the way. Kobe's rookie season was not an instant coronation. He had to sit on the bench. There were games when he was barely used. There were nights he entered the game for only a few minutes, took one shot, scored a few points, and then returned to the bench. For someone who had grown used to carrying an entire high school team on his shoulders, that was not easy to accept. But the NBA did not care who you had been at 17. Here, Kobe had to learn from the beginning again. A different speed, a different strength, a different pressure, and patience was also part of growing up. Even so, he still found a way to make people unable to ignore him. In 1997, Kobe won the slam dunk contest. A boy who had just left high school, only 18 years old, stepped out during All-Star Weekend and showed the entire league that he had not come here to stand in the shadows for too long. That victory did not yet turn him into a superstar, but it felt like a warning. Something very bold was growing inside the Lakers' uniform. Then the playoffs arrived, and with them came the first truly brutal lesson. Against the Utah Jazz, in the decisive moments, when many people did not want to take the final shot, Kobe took the ball. He shot, missed, shot again, missed again. Consecutive air balls flew past the rim, leaving a teenager standing under the lights, in front of the noise of the crowd and the weight of public failure. That was the kind of moment that could haunt a young player for years. For Kobe, it became a laboratory. He did not only remember that he had missed, he dissected why he had missed. The shots had not been far off in direction. They had been short. His legs were tired. His body was not yet durable enough to hold his technique in the final moments. That conclusion was cold, simple, and very Kobe. If the problem was the legs, then he had to train so that his legs would never betray him again. The next day, he returned to the gym. That is the most important point in the early stage of Kobe Bryant's career. Not the slam dunk contest title, not the 13th pick, not the early comparisons to Michael Jordan. It was his reaction after failing in front of the entire country. Kobe was not born as the Black Mamba. He was forged from the bench, from the few minutes he was given on the court, from the doubt of grown men, from shots that did not touch the rim, and from the obsession that the same failure was not allowed to happen twice. The air balls against Utah did not make Kobe Bryant smaller. They only made him more dangerous. Entering his second season, Kobe was no longer the teenager sitting on the bench waiting for a few minutes.
He scored more,
was given more opportunities, and began stepping into games that made the entire NBA look closely. Kobe was not perfect yet. but he played like someone who did not want to be promised a future. He wanted to drag that future toward him immediately. Then Michael Jordan appeared on the other side. For the NBA in the late 1990s, Jordan was the ultimate standard. He was the shadow beneath which every young talent was placed. Kobe admired Jordan, studying every fadeaway, every footwork pattern, every way he read the defense. But when he stepped onto the court, he did not carry the mindset of a child asking for an autograph. He wanted to compete with Jordan. He wanted to measure himself against the highest standard. Those matchups were what made the public begin to look at Kobe differently. At 19 years old, he was voted into the All-Star starting lineup, becoming the youngest player to start an All-Star game at that time. From an internal Lakers talent, Kobe had become a phenomenon across the entire NBA. Young, arrogant, beautiful to watch, and dangerous because he did not fear the big stage. But Kobe's light did not appear alone. Right beside him was Shaquille O'Neal, a completely different force. If Kobe was speed, technique, and ambition sharpened like a knife, then Shaq was primal power under the basket. One man crushed defenses. The other sliced into open space, with the feeling that he was always ready to create a moment that would make the entire arena rise to its feet. On the court, they were a nightmare for every opponent. But inside the same team, those two sources of energy were never simple. Shaq was already a recognized superstar. Kobe was not born to stand behind anyone forever. They were too good not to need each other, but also too proud to easily yield to each other. The Lakers had two talents capable of opening a dynasty, but they also had two egos large enough to shake that dynasty from within. So the Lakers needed more than a strong roster. They needed someone who knew how to turn talent into order, ambition into a system, and keep those two enormous personalities looking in the same direction. That man was Phil Jackson. When Phil arrived in Los Angeles, he did not simply take a coaching job. He took on a massive problem. Keeping Shaq in a position of dominance, helping Kobe mature without breaking the team apart, and turning the Lakers from a collection of stars into a true empire. From here, the Lakers dynasty began to take shape, brilliant, fierce, but never peaceful from the beginning. Under Phil Jackson, the Lakers were no longer just a team with two major stars. They began to become a machine with a clear shape. Shaq was still the earthquake under the basket. Kobe was still the blade cutting into open space. But now, instead of relying only on talent, the Lakers had a system to turn that power into something even more frightening. The habit of winning. The 1999-2000 season began with enormous expectations, but Kobe did not enter it in perfect condition. He suffered a hand injury early in the season and had to stand outside, watching the team operate before he could immediately prove himself in the new era. For someone like Kobe, sitting out was never merely rest. It felt like being locked outside a battle he believed should have belonged to him. When he returned, Kobe was no longer the 18-year-old boy who drew attention only with beautiful dunks. He matured very quickly. His scoring became steadier. His defense became more aggressive. His movement within the system became better. And most importantly, he began to understand that to win at the highest level, it was not always necessary to have the ball in his hands the most. At the same time, Shaquille O'Neal entered the most destructive season of his career, winning MVP and becoming a force that almost no one in the NBA could stop. But a team does not become a champion only through the regular season. It has to survive the nights when everything seems to be collapsing. That night came in Game 7 of the 2000 Western Conference Finals against the Portland Trail Blazers. The Lakers were backed into a corner. Staples Center no longer sounded like a noisy fortress. At times it was silent enough to suffocate. Portland led by a large margin. The door to the NBA Finals seemed to be closing, and it was in that very moment that Kobe began to place his fingerprints on history. He did not only score, he stole back the rhythm of the game. He pulled the energy back. Then, when the game had turned, Kobe had the ball, drove into open space, and floated a pass into the air. Shaq rose up, slammed the ball through the rim, and roared as the entire arena exploded. That alley-oop was not just a score. It was the image that gave birth to the dynasty. Kobe and Shaq, one man creating the moment, the other crushing it into an icon. the Lakers entered the finals against the Indiana Pacers. Shaq was still dominant, still making every defense collapse. But Kobe's first title did not come through a smooth road. In Game 2, he sprained his ankle, had to leave the game, and missed Game 3. For many young players, that could have been a reminder that they did not yet need to carry the heaviest part. Kobe returned in Game 4 as if the pain were only part of the test. Then Shaq fouled out in overtime. That was the moment when the entire Lakers team needed someone else to stand up. Not a supporting star, not a talent still learning on the job, but someone cold enough to take hold of the game when the team's greatest center was no longer on the floor. Kobe did that. He scored crucial points, attacked Indiana with the stubbornness of a man who did not want to wait until the future to be recognized. The Lakers won, and on that night, Kobe Bryant was no longer just the kid beside Shaq. He showed the NBA that he could decide a major game when everything became most dangerous. The 2000 championship opened the door. But 2001 was when the Lakers made the entire league feel a chill. That season was not peaceful. Inside the locker room, the tension between Kobe and Shaq began to become clearer. Kobe increasingly wanted to assert his role. Some teammates felt he wanted too badly to be the hero. Shaq was irritated when the ball did not go through him as much as before. The two men still wore the same uniform, still aimed for victory together. But behind that victory were two different hungers. Shaq wanted to protect his place at the center, while Kobe wanted to prove he had not been born to stand behind forever. That tension could have destroyed a team. But when the playoffs the Lakers turned all that discomfort into an act of destruction. Portland was swept, Sacramento was swept. San Antonio, the team that had once made the Lakers suffer, was swept as well. Opponent after opponent stepped forward and was pushed off the tracks as if the Lakers were playing at a different speed. They did not only win, they made winning look ruthless. Shaq was still the enormous force. Kobe was looking more and more like an assassin who had learned how to choose the right moment to strike. Opponents could prepare for one of them, but it was very hard to survive when both erupted in the same series. The 2001 NBA Finals brought Kobe back to Philadelphia, his hometown. The opponent was Allen Iverson and the 76ers, a team carrying the fierce energy of a city that was not easy to love and not easy to forgive. For Kobe, this was not just the finals. This was a return to the place where everything had begun, where the boy from Italy had once had to prove he was strong enough to compete with American basketball. The Lakers lost only one game in that entire playoff run. They finished the journey with an almost unbelievable record, 15 wins and 1 loss. Kobe had his second ring at just 22 years old, but that glory was not as complete as people imagined. On the day he won a championship in his own hometown, his father was not there. The family cracks surrounding Kobe's relationship with Vanessa had made one of the moments that should have been warmest in his life feel colder. Outside the court, Kobe was a champion. Inside, he was still a son who wanted to see his father there. That is what makes Kobe's story different from a box score. He could defeat the entire NBA, but he could not force private empty spaces to disappear. In 2002, the Lakers entered the season with a goal that very few teams dared to say out loud: a three-peat, 3 consecutive championships. This was no longer about winning one more time. It was about entering the territory of true dynasties. By this point, Kobe was no longer an emerging talent. He had become one of the best players in the league, selected to the All-NBA first team, increasingly complete and even more dangerous. The way he played was different too. Still explosive, still sharp, but now carrying the confidence of someone who had gone through enough big games to no longer be overwhelmed by the stage. At 23, Kobe already carried the shape of a star who was no longer asking for a place in history. He was taking it. The 2002 playoff journey was not as easy as the year before. The Sacramento Kings, a familiar opponent, had become stronger, deeper, and confident enough to believe they could dethrone the Lakers. That series was tense, rough, full of contact and pressure. The Lakers no longer passed through opponents like a clean storm. They had to struggle. They had to endure. They had to pull each game out of Sacramento's hands with the composure of a team used to standing on the edge of the cliff. Then, the Lakers entered the finals against the New Jersey Nets, against a team rich in speed and discipline. The Lakers' championship experience became too great a difference. Kobe played like someone who understood that each ring at this point did not merely add to his resume, but was pushing him into a very small group of players who had dominated an entire era. The Lakers completed the three-peat. Kobe Bryant, only 23 years old, already had 3 NBA championships. That number was enough to make any career enviable. But for Kobe, it opened a question more dangerous than any praise. How great was he without Shaq? That question began to follow him like a shadow. Shaq was the Finals MVP in all 3 championships. Shaq was the tactical center, the greatest nightmare for every opponent, the man no one could replace in the paint. Kobe had huge moments, huge games, and plays that made the whole world hold its breath. But in many people's eyes, that dynasty still carried Shaq's imprint more strongly. And for someone like Kobe Bryant, that was not a harmless observation. It was a scratch. After the three-peat, the Lakers were no longer intact as they appeared from the outside. Shaq struggled with injuries and conditioning issues. Kobe increasingly wanted to carry more, control more, prove more. The team that had once been terrifying because it had 2 centers of power now began to feel heavy because those 2 centers were pulling in different directions. When everything ran smoothly, they were the most destructive duo in the NBA. When everything fell out of rhythm, they became proof that enormous talent could also create enormous friction. In the 2002-2003 season, Kobe entered one of the most ferocious scoring stretches of his life. At one point, he scored at least 40 points in 9 consecutive games, dragging the Lakers back into the race with a kind of basketball that almost challenged every individual limit. Every night, Kobe seemed to be telling the entire league that he was not merely the addition to a great center. He could place the whole team on his own shoulders, but the Lakers were no longer as balanced as before. Kobe's points could leave the crowd stunned, but they were not enough to cover all the cracks in the team's structure. When the San Antonio Spurs eliminated the Lakers in the 2003 playoffs, it was not just a sporting defeat. It was a sign that the first dynasty of Kobe and Shaq had already passed its peak. 3 straight years of glory had turned them into legends, but it had also placed between them a question no one could avoid anymore. After everything, who was truly leading the Lakers? The question of who was truly leading the Lakers did not remain in the locker room for long. In 2004, it stepped straight into the light. The Lakers tried to extend the dynasty with a major gamble, bringing Karl Malone and Gary Payton to Los Angeles, pairing them with Shaq and Kobe to create a lineup that looked almost unreal on paper. 4 big names, 4 big personalities, 1 single goal, 1 more championship before the door closed. But basketball does not operate on reputation. The Lakers had too many stars, but they were no longer a healthy collective. Shaq and Kobe were not only different in the way they played, they were different in terms of power, responsibility, and their place in the history of the team. Even Phil Jackson could not stand between 2 storms forever. The 2004 NBA Finals against the Detroit Pistons became the closing bell. Detroit did not glitter like the Lakers, but they had what Los Angeles was losing: cohesion, discipline, and a shared identity. When the Lakers collapsed, it was not only a finals defeat, it was the end of a dynasty that had already cracked from within. That summer, everything broke apart. Shaquille O'Neal was traded to the Miami Heat.
What?
Phil Jackson left the coaching seat. The people who had once helped Kobe create 3 consecutive championships began leaving Los Angeles one by one. Kobe stayed. On the outside, that was what he wanted. A Lakers team without Shaq's enormous shadow, without the question of who the true center really was. But freedom does not always arrive like a reward. Sometimes it arrives like a sentence. From the moment Shaq left, every Lakers failure was placed on Kobe's shoulders. Every loss, every missed shot, every disappointing season became evidence for those who believed he could not win a championship without Shaq. This was the loneliest period of Kobe's career, not because he had teammates, but because for the first time, he had to live inside the world he had once wanted. A world where he was the absolute center, There was no one large enough to share the lights. No Shaq to pull the defense toward the basket. If the Lakers won, Kobe would be recognized. If the Lakers lost, the old question would return. How much did those 3 rings truly belong to him? After that, the Lakers struggled to find their identity again. The team that had once been a championship machine became fragile, unbalanced, and lacking depth. Kobe could still score in ways that made audiences leap out of their seats, but the brighter he shone, the lonelier he became. If he scored a lot, he was called selfish. If he passed more, he was accused of avoiding responsibility. If he exploded offensively and the Lakers still lost, people asked why he did not make his teammates better. That was the cruelest trap of the post-Shaq era. Anything he did could become evidence against Kobe. Then Phil Jackson returned. His return did not immediately erase every problem, but it brought the Lakers closer to the structure that had once made them great. Phil understood that Kobe was not easy to coach, not easy to compromise with, but he also understood that behind that stubbornness was a player willing to pay the full price if he believed that price led to winning. The post-Shaq period, therefore, was not merely the empty space between 2 Lakers dynasties. It was the furnace Kobe had to pass through in order to separate himself from the old shadow. The first 3 rings had placed him among champions, but the years after Shaq left put him before the real test. Could Kobe Bryant become a legend standing alone, or would he forever be mentioned as the other half of an empire that had already passed? The answer did not come immediately. Before more glory arrived, Kobe had to go through heavy seasons, wild scoring nights, bitter losses, and a growing obsession, proving that he had not only once won with the Lakers, but that he could pull the Lakers back to the top by himself. When the Lakers were no longer strong enough to shield him from every doubt, Kobe Bryant did the only thing he had always known how to do. He turned the court into the place where answers were for himself. After the Shaq era, every Kobe game was no longer just a contest against an opponent. It felt like a public trial. He was no longer simply playing to win, but to prove that he was not Shaq's shadow, not a star protected by 3 rings, not someone who only shone because a great center pulled entire defenses toward him. Kobe's basketball at that time was fierce to the point of extremity. There were nights when the Lakers did not need a complete system. They only needed Kobe to hold the ball and do what very few people in the world could do: score even when the entire defense knew in advance that he was going to score. In December 2005, against the Dallas Mavericks, Kobe scored 62 points in only 3 quarters. What was frightening was that after 3 quarters, he alone had scored more points than the entire Dallas team. He did not need to play the 4th quarter. The game had already been finished before it could become a real chase. Then on January 22, 2006, the Toronto Raptors walked into Staples Center and left with a historic wound. Kobe scored 81 points, a number that felt almost absurd in the modern NBA. Only Wilt Chamberlain had ever scored more in a single game. But what made that night haunting was not only the scoreboard. It was the feeling that Kobe had pulled the entire game into a zone of his own control. The more he was surrounded, the colder he became. The more no one believed he could keep going, the more he kept going. After 81 points, no one could still pretend that Kobe was merely anyone's shadow. He had become one of the most terrifying scorers in basketball history. But at that very moment, the greatest paradox appeared. The Lakers still were not strong enough. The 50-point, 60-point, and 81-point games stunned the entire NBA, but they could not turn an unbalanced roster into a championship contender. If Kobe scored a lot, he was called selfish. If Kobe passed more, he was accused of avoiding responsibility. If Kobe exploded and the Lakers still lost, people asked why he did not make his teammates better. That was the trap of the post-Shaq era. Anything he did could become evidence against him. So, after proving that he could stand alone, Kobe had to move on to an even harder challenge, turning individual greatness into collective victory once again. When Kobe changed from number 8 to number 24, it was not merely a jersey change. It felt like a cut between 2 versions of the same person. Number 8 was the young Kobe, explosive, arrogant, always wanting to prove he belonged at the top. Number 24 was colder, heavier, and more conscious of legacy. Kobe understood that great scoring was still not enough. If he wanted his name to stand on its own in history, he had to win again. Not only create nights that left audiences stunned, but bring the Lakers back to the throne. At one point, Kobe nearly lost patience with the Lakers' front office and publicly revealed his desire to leave. That was not merely the anger of a difficult superstar. It was the cry of a man too exhausted from carrying a team that was not strong enough, while every failure was being used to judge his legacy. Then Pau Gasol appeared. Gasol was not as loud as Shaq, but he was the piece Kobe needed most. Intelligent, calm, able to pass, willing to sacrifice, and skilled enough to make the Lakers more balanced. With Gasol, Kobe no longer had to score 50 points just to keep the team in the race. The Lakers once again had the shape of a championship team. In the 2007-2008 season, Kobe won the regular season MVP, the greatest recognition for years, spent under scrutiny and doubt. The Lakers returned to the NBA Finals, but on the other side stood the Boston Celtics, and Boston defeated them with strength, defense, and toughness. Game 6 was a deep wound. The Lakers were suffocated, and Kobe had to watch the opponents celebrate when he thought he had come very close to the answer. But for Kobe, failure was rarely just failure. It became a training schedule. It became silence. It became fuel. A year later, the Lakers returned to the finals against the Orlando Magic. This time, there was no Shaq beside him, no shadow large enough to shield him from responsibility. This was Kobe's team, Kobe's opportunity, the answer he had been chasing since the day Shaq left Los Angeles. When the Lakers were leading in the series, and a reporter asked why he was not, smiling, Kobe simply answered, "Job's not finished. The work was not done." That sentence described him exactly. No celebration when the goal had not been completed, no reward for himself when victory was still ahead. The Lakers defeated Orlando. Kobe had his 4th championship and his first Finals MVP. That ring did not merely add to his resume. It answered the question that had followed him for years. Could Kobe Bryant win a championship as the #1 leader? The answer was yes. But for that answer to truly feel complete, Kobe still had to go through Boston. In 2010, the Lakers faced the Celtics again in a heavy, rough, and physical series. Game 7 was not a night when Kobe scored perfectly. He did not shoot well, but he did not disappear. He rebounded, defended, absorbed contact, fought for every small possession, and found a way to win in an ugly game. The Lakers defeated Boston. Kobe had his 5th ring and his 2nd Finals MVP. He had won with Shaq and then won without Shaq. He had built his first dynasty beside a great center, then led the Lakers himself into a second dynasty. That was the final peak of Kobe Bryant as a champion. From here, his body would begin to pay the price. But in the moment Boston was defeated, Kobe had gained what he had been chasing for many years. Not just another ring, but the right to stand alone before history. After the 2010 ring, Kobe Bryant had achieved what he had been chasing for many years. Winning with Shaq, and then winning when Shaq was no longer beside him. But sports always carries one cold truth. Even legends cannot negotiate with time forever. After 2010, the Lakers were no longer the machine that had once made the NBA afraid. Phil Jackson left the coaching seat. The Dallas Mavericks swept the Lakers out of the 2011 playoffs. Los Angeles tried to extend the race with a new gamble: Steve Nash and Dwight Howard. On paper, that was a lineup strong enough to make the entire league pay attention. But big names do not automatically become chemistry. Nash was no longer as durable as before, Howard never fully fit, and the Lakers grew heavier and heavier under the weight of their own expectations. Kobe still refused to accept decline. In the 2012-2013 season, as the Lakers struggled to find their way into the playoffs, he almost drained his body completely to pull the team forward. He played too many minutes, carried too many possessions, and gritted his teeth through too many waves of pain. This was no longer the performance of a superstar at his peak, but the image of a man using willpower to resist a body that was beginning to rebel. Then on April 12, 2013, against the Golden State Warriors, Kobe tore his Achilles tendon. For many athletes, that is almost a sign of the end. Kobe fell down, then got back up. He walked to the free throw line, made both shots, and only then left the court. That moment said so much about Kobe. Not beautiful, but painful. A body that had been torn apart still tried to finish its final task before agreeing to stop. Inside those 2 free throws was the whole of who he was: proud, stubborn, extreme, and unable to let go even when his body had already ordered him to stop. Kobe still returned after the injury, but it was no longer the return of a man challenging the entire league as before. It was a battle with what remained of himself. Achilles, knee, shoulder, each part of his body began demanding back the price Kobe had forced it to pay for 2 decades. The Lakers grew weaker. The losses became more frequent. The explosive nights became fewer. The man who had once turned every doubt into fuel finally had to face an opponent that could not be defeated through training. Age. Even so, Kobe still managed to pass Michael Jordan on the all-time scoring list at that time. For someone who had once studied every movement of Jordan through videotapes, that moment was not just a number. It felt like a strange circle of fate. The boy who had once learned by imitating his idol had now gone far enough to surpass the greatest standard of his life. But the closer the end came, the less the story was about whom Kobe had surpassed. It became about how much of himself he could still hold on to. A torn shoulder, aching knees, slower strides, a leap that was no longer the same. And finally, Kobe understood that the greatest love of his life also needed a goodbye. He announced his retirement with Dear Basketball, a letter to the sport that had raised him, defined him, tormented him, and taken almost all of his strength. It was not merely a retirement announcement. It was the farewell of a man who had loved basketball since he was a little boy rolling up socks into a ball, then spent his entire life turning that love into glory, obsession, and pain. On April 13, 2016, Kobe stepped into his final game against the Utah Jazz. Nearly 20 years earlier, also against Utah, the young Kobe had once thrown those painful air balls in the playoffs. On his final night, he met them again with a body that was almost completely drained, in a Lakers season that had nothing left to fight for except memory. But Kobe did not leave the court with a faint wave. He scored 60 points. One last time, Kobe pulled the entire arena into that familiar feeling. Everyone knew he was going to shoot, but no one could look away. He was tired. He was older. His body no longer obeyed the way it once had, but the will inside him still burned in a way that was unmistakably Kobe. When the game ended, he stood at center court and said, "Mamba out," 2 short words, closing 20 years of a man who had turned every shot, every failure, and every wound into part of a legend. From the airballs at age 18, against Utah, 60 points on his final night, also against Utah, Kobe Bryant's career closed like a circle. His body was emptied, but in that final moment, he still kept the thing that had carried him through his entire life, refusing to leave the court, while there was still one spark inside him left to burn. But to understand Kobe Bryant, looking only at the basketball court is not enough. On the court, he could control everything through work, through skill, through stubbornness, and through shots in decisive moments. If he lost, he trained more. If he was doubted, he used the next game to answer. If his body hurt, he gritted his teeth and stood back up. Basketball, no matter how brutal it was still a world whose rules Kobe understood. Private life was not like that. Outside the lights of the Lakers, Kobe no longer had a scoreboard to prove he was right. There was no final buzzer to close an argument. No championship was powerful enough to heal every crack inside a family. And it was precisely in the place that seemed closest to him that Kobe had to face another kind of loneliness. Quieter, harder to speak about, and impossible to solve with a dawn workout. Kobe was born into a basketball family. His father, Joe Jellybean Bryant, was not only the person who brought basketball close to Kobe from a very early age, but also the first model through which the boy looked at the professional world. From Philadelphia to Italy, from the small courts, where Joe played to the halftimes when Kobe ran out to shoot, their father-son bond had once been connected to the ball in a very natural way. For Kobe, basketball was not only a profession, it had once been the thread connecting him to his father. That is why the crack that came later hurt even more. When Kobe fell in love with Vanessa Lane, that relationship quickly became a point of tension within the Bryant family. Kobe was still very young then. His career was rising at dizzying speed, and Vanessa also entered his life before she could truly prepare for the weight of the media and the glare of NBA fame. Kobe's family, especially his father, did not fully support the relationship, partly because they thought Kobe was too young to get married, partly because of cultural and racial differences, and because of how they saw their son's future. To an outsider, that may have seemed like an ordinary family conflict when a young star marries early. But for Kobe, it touched something deeper. He had spent his entire life proving that he was mature enough before those who doubted him. On the court, if anyone said he was too young, he answered with points, titles, and nights of training until exhaustion. But inside a family, that kind of proof was not so simple. You can win a finals game, but you cannot force your parents to accept the person you love with a championship ring. In 2001, Kobe married Vanessa. His parents did not attend the wedding. That is a small detail when placed beside the enormous numbers in Kobe's career. But emotionally, it weighs far more than many statistics. Because at that same time, Kobe was one of the brightest young stars in the NBA. He had just entered a championship era with the Lakers and was being seen across America as the future of basketball. Off the court, thousands of people could chant his name. On television, people analyzed every shot he took. The city of Los Angeles was beginning to see him as part of a new history. But on his wedding day, the absence of his parents was still there. Not long after, Kobe and the Lakers continued moving toward another championship. In 2001, what should have been one of the most complete moments of his life happened in Philadelphia, Kobe's hometown. He returned to the place where he was born, the place that had once witnessed the boy from Italy having to prove he belonged in American basketball, and won an NBA championship on that very soil. For anyone, it could have been a perfect scene. A son returning home, at the height of glory, with a second ring in his hand. But Kobe was not truly complete, because the father he wanted to see was not there. Joe Bryant was not there to witness his son become a champion in Philadelphia. Not there to see the boy who had once run onto the court to shoot during halftimes in Italy, now standing at the top of the NBA. Not there on a night when Kobe's past and present should have met each other. That is one of the saddest paradoxes of Kobe Bryant's youth. He could make an entire arena explode. He could make opponents afraid. He could carry the Lakers to a championship. But he could not pull his loved ones into the stands if they had chosen to stand outside that moment. This wound was not as loud as the conflicts with Shaq, did not appear as clearly as an injury on the court, and was not counted in points or titles. It lay deeper. It showed that from very early on, behind the image of Kobe as cold, proud, and almost untouchable, there was still a son who wanted to be seen by his father, not as a superstar, not as a champion, but as the child who had once learned basketball from him. And perhaps that kind of loneliness was what made Kobe Bryant's private life far more complicated than the Black Mamba image the public was used to. On the court, he always found a way to control his fate. In his family, he had to learn that there are distances that cannot be crossed by talent, and there are losses that do not need an accident to begin hurting. Kobe met Vanessa in 1999, in a setting very different from the basketball court, a music video set, where Kobe at the time was trying to step beyond the image of a Lakers player and touch the world of entertainment. He was no longer the teenager sitting on the bench waiting for a few minutes. But he was not yet the untouchable legend he would later become. It was a time when Kobe was growing up very quickly in front of the public eye. Young, famous, ambitious, charismatic, and almost unable to move slowly in anything. Vanessa was only 17 at the time, still a high school girl, not yet someone who had lived inside the media whirlwind of the NBA. She did not enter Kobe's life as a star equal to him, nor as someone accustomed to the lights of American sports. She was a young girl pulled straight into the orbit of a man who was becoming an icon. It was precisely that difference that made their relationship both captivating and fragile from the very beginning. That relationship moved at dizzying speed. Kobe was drawn to Vanessa very quickly, as if this was not a passing encounter outside the court, but a choice he wanted to keep for himself only. About half a year after they met, the two became engaged. By 2001, Kobe and Vanessa were married when he was only in his early 20s and was entering a period of dominance with the Lakers. It was not only a wedding of young love, it was also a very major choice in Kobe's life. After the cracks with his parents, after the opposition from his original family, Kobe still did not turn back. He chose Vanessa. And from that choice, a private world began to be built outside the noise of the NBA. But that world was not quiet at all. Kobe was a Lakers superstar, living inside a packed game schedule, under the pressure to win, under the examining eyes of the media and fans. Vanessa entered marriage when she was still too young to fully understand the price of becoming the wife of a sports icon. She did not just marry a man, she stepped into the entire rhythm of Kobe Bryant's life. The flights, the games, the rumors, the expectations, the nights when he came home in silence after defeat or amid cheers after victory. So their love from the beginning was not like a fairy tale. It had the magnetism of youth, the defiance of two people who wanted to be together, but also a pressure far greater than that of an ordinary marriage. While Kobe was rising to the top with the Lakers, Vanessa had to learn how to stand beside a man whom the whole world kept demanding from. Every Kobe victory lifted his name higher, but it also made their private life more closely examined. Then that small family began to take clearer shape. Natalia Bryant was born in 2003. Gianna Bryant was born in 2006. Many years later, Bianca Bryant arrived in 2016, and then Capri Bryant was born in 2019. Those four daughters gradually created a very different layer of life around Kobe. A world not measured by points, not ending after 4 quarters, and not something that could be won through willpower alone. This is what made Kobe more interesting away from the basketball court. The man who once entered games with a cold face, who had been obsessed with every shot, who viewed failure as a personal insult, became the father of 4 daughters. In that home, Kobe was no longer the absolute center the way he was on the court. He was a husband, a father, a man who had to learn how to be present in a different way, not through a roar after a score, but through his presence in ordinary moments. But that warmth should not be romanticized too soon, because Kobe and Vanessa's love, though enduring, did not travel a smooth road. The private family Kobe had chosen would become the place where he found softness after the lights, but also the place most deeply wounded when his mistakes and scandals crashed in. Vanessa was not only the girl Kobe fell in love with very quickly in 1999. She would become the woman forced to stand inside the storm when the image of her husband was pulled down from its high pedestal. And it was from here that the private story of Kobe Bryant entered its most difficult chapter, when an icon of discipline and victory had to face the greatest moral crack of his life. The private family Kobe Bryant chose had begun with very young love, with fast, strong, and determined decisions. But that life was not kept peaceful for long. In 2003, when Kobe was in one of the brightest positions in American sports, an incident occurred that changed his image forever. That summer, Kobe went to Colorado to prepare for knee surgery. There, he was accused of sexual assault by a 19-year-old hotel employee. Kobe admitted that he had had an extramarital sexual encounter with her, but denied the sexual assault allegation, insisting that, from his perspective, it had been consensual. The admission of infidelity alone was enough to shake his very young marriage to Vanessa, but the criminal allegation that followed pushed the story far beyond the private sphere of family life, turning Kobe from a rising sports icon into the center of one of the most serious scandals in the NBA at that time. Before that, the public was used to seeing Kobe as the embodiment of discipline, willpower, and a kind of ambition that seemed almost tireless. He was not the type of star who frequently appeared in headlines because of off-court scandals. That was exactly why the 2003 case created such a strong fall in how people saw him. Endorsement deals were affected. The media followed every development closely. Fans were divided. Some defended him, some turned away, and some did not know where to place their love for Kobe, the player. When facing the heavy accusations, surrounding Kobe the person. That case cannot be pushed aside as a minor detail, but it also cannot be turned into a hammer that shatters the entire person of Kobe Bryant. It sits in the most difficult area of every story about a legend, where glory is not enough to erase mistakes, and mistakes also do not simply erase everything a person has ever created. For Vanessa, that incident was not a news headline. It was her marriage. It was her husband. It was the young family she and Kobe had just begun to build. Through the media cameras, people saw Vanessa sitting beside Kobe at the press conference, where he apologized to his wife for his act of infidelity and stated that he would fight the criminal allegation. That image became one of the hardest moments to watch in Kobe's public life. A man who had once controlled the court with a cold stare now had to face shame, public anger, and the risk of losing the most familiar things outside basketball. In 2004, the criminal case was dismissed after the accuser did not want to continue testifying in court. Later, the two sides reached a civil settlement outside court, the details of which were not made public. Kobe also issued a public apology. He still said that he himself believed the encounter had been consensual, but acknowledged that he later understood. The woman did not view the incident in the same way he did. After this case, Kobe Bryant's legacy could no longer be told in a single color. What he did on the court remained extraordinary. 5 championships, unimaginable scoring nights, the spirit of Mamba mentality, all of that was a real part of Kobe. But the crack of 2003 was also another real part. It made his image harder, heavier, and forced people to see him not only as a symbol of victory, but as a human being with light, darkness, mistakes, and consequences. After 2003, Kobe continued playing. He still scored, still competed for championships, still rebuilt his career step by step. But private life could not return to what it had been simply through time. His marriage with Vanessa had gone through a major crack, and although they stayed together, that wound did not disappear immediately after an apology or a new season. Ahead of them was not a clean road after the scandal, but a longer journey. Endurance, silence, rebuilding, cracking again, and then learning how to stay. After the 2003 scandal, Kobe Bryant could return to the basketball court, score points, win titles, and gradually restore his image in front of the public. But a marriage does not operate like an NBA season. There is no clear schedule, no standings table to show how much progress has been made, and no trophy powerful enough to prove that a private wound has truly healed. Kobe and Vanessa stayed together after that incident. From the outside, the image of the Bryant family was gradually rebuilt. A Lakers superstar, a young wife, children, moments appearing together in public. But staying does not mean peace. There are marriages that continue to exist, not because everything is fine, but because two people are still trying to understand whether what remains is worth saving. For many years after that, Kobe continued living at the pace of a man obsessed with winning. The game schedule, injuries, media, the pressure of leading the Lakers, the questions about his legacy after the Shaq era, all of it kept his life stretched tight. Vanessa, on the other side, was not merely the person standing in family photographs. She was the one who had to live with the price of that fame every day. The examining eyes, the rumors, the old wounds that may not have truly gone to sleep, and a marriage that the public always treated as a subject for judgment. By 2011, that crack no longer remained in silence. Vanessa filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. It was a moment that made many people realize the Kobe-Vanessa marriage was not as solid as it appeared from the outside. After the championships, after the image of a man who did not know how to surrender on the court, Kobe could still stand before the possibility of losing the private family he had once chosen to protect. The pain here was not only that a famous couple nearly separated. It lay in the familiar paradox of Kobe's life. The man who could control a game in the final seconds could not completely control the consequences of his choices off the court. On the basketball court, Kobe always believed that if he worked hard enough, endured pain long enough, and fought fiercely enough, he could change the result. But in marriage, the will of one person is not enough. Staying or leaving belongs to two people, two wounds, two limits of endurance. During that period, Kobe entered a different kind of test, not scoring more points, not defeating Boston, not proving that he could win a championship without Shaq. This time what needed to be protected was not on the scoreboard. It was inside his own home, inside the wife who had been with him since he was very young, inside the children who were growing up in a family at risk of being split in two. By 2013, Kobe and Vanessa reconciled. They did not go through with the divorce. That marriage was kept. But to tell this story as a simple romantic victory would be too easy. They did not return to each other, like two characters stepping out of a fairy tale. They returned after hurt, after exhaustion, after years in which trust had been tested more than once. That reconciliation, therefore, should not be seen as the end of a crisis, but as a new choice. Kobe and Vanessa chose to continue, but that choice did not erase everything that had happened. It only showed that this marriage, like Kobe himself, could not be told in a straight line. There was love, and there was anger. There was hurt, and there was forgiveness. There were things the public saw, and many things only the people inside truly understood. After that near divorce, Kobe's image within his family gradually began to change more clearly, especially as he moved toward the end of his career and then left the NBA. The man who had once placed basketball above almost everything began to have more time to live inside a different role. Not the leader of the Lakers, not the Black Mamba, not the symbol of victory, but a husband, a father of 4 daughters. And it was precisely that role that would open the softest and also the most painful chapter in Kobe Bryant's life. After many years living at the pace of a man always being pulled forward by the next game, Kobe Bryant finally stepped out of the NBA in 2016. On the court, he closed it with 60 points and the words "Mamba out." But in life, that sentence was not the ending. It only opened another role, quieter, less glamorous, but perhaps one that forced Kobe to relearn more than any finals ever had. For the first time in 20 years, Kobe no longer had to wake up to prepare for a new season. No more Lakers practice schedule. No more long flights after a loss. No more pressure to drag the whole team through nights when his body ached. The man who had once lived by the clock of the NBA suddenly had more time to live by the rhythm of his family. And there, Kobe was no longer the one in control of everything. He was Vanessa's husband. He was the father of Natalia, Gianna, Bianca, and Capri. He was the only man in a house full of women, and Kobe himself once said he was very comfortable in that position. That sentence sounds light, but it opens up a very different image of him. On the court, Kobe was a man who gave orders through his eyes, through his shots, through a will that forced both teammates and opponents to tense themselves around him. At home, his daughters could look at him and say, "Dad, shut up." And he told that story with something close to delight, as if that ordinary helplessness made him feel even more that he belonged to his family. That detail is precious because it breaks through the coldest shell of Kobe Bryant. The man who once made the entire NBA afraid no longer stood in the middle of his home like a general. He was a father teased by his daughters, a man who had almost no decision-making power in the house, except when the conversation turned to basketball. For Kobe, after years of controlling games down to every breath, being allowed to lose control inside his family may have been a form of peace. After retirement, Kobe began missing many Lakers games, not because he had moved away from basketball, but because he chose to appear at smaller courts, where his daughters were playing. It was a quiet but powerful reversal. Before, the whole world came to watch Kobe. Now, Kobe sat in the stands to watch his children. Before, cameras searched for him in finals games. Now, what pulled him out of the house did not necessarily have to be the Lakers, but could be a children's basketball game, a practice session, a very small moment in his daughter's childhood. After retirement, Kobe also did not disappear from ambition. He became a businessman, an author, a storyteller. Dear Basketball was not only a farewell to his old sport, but also the opening of another Kobe, one who wanted to turn experience, memory, and life philosophy into stories for the next generation. But no matter how far his creative projects developed, the role that made the public see him more softly was found in his family. The father of 4 daughters, Natalia was the eldest daughter. the one who witnessed many of the most turbulent stages of the Bryant family. Gianna was the girl who carried the clearest love for basketball inside her. Bianca and Capri came later, when Kobe had already stepped out of the NBA and had more time to be present in family life. Those four daughters created a world completely different from the Lakers' locker room, a place where Kobe did not need to prove he was great, did not need to take the final shot, did not need to win in order to be loved. What makes this chapter of his life moving is that Kobe seemed to begin understanding something he had often sacrificed during his career: presence. For 20 years, his love for basketball was measured by extreme labor. But after retirement, his love for family was measured by more ordinary things. Sitting and watching his children play, listening to his daughters talk back to him, accepting being teased, learning how to be a father who did not always have to be right. This was a very different Kobe, not the Kobe of shots that left opponents frozen, not the Kobe of eyes that wanted to crush every doubt, but Kobe sitting beside his family, letting his daughters pull him out of the untouchable image the whole world had built around him. And among those four daughters, one would turn Kobe's post-retirement chapter into the softest, proudest, and then most painful part of the entire story: Gianna Bryant. Among Kobe Bryant's four daughters, Gianna was the one who pulled him back to basketball in a very different way. No longer the basketball of finals games, decisive shots, or debates about legacy. With Gianna, basketball became a private language between father and daughter, closer, softer, but also far more painful to look back on. Gianna, or Gigi, did not love basketball simply because her father was Kobe Bryant. She truly loved the game. And Kobe saw that. After retirement, instead of appearing frequently at Lakers games as a legend sitting courtside, he spent more time on youth courts, where Gianna and her teammates played. Before, the whole world came to watch Kobe. Now, Kobe sat outside the sidelines to watch his daughter. It was a very quiet reversal, but a very powerful one. Kobe had once been almost ruthless in what he demanded from himself and from those around him. On NBA courts, he did not easily forgive carelessness, did not accept halfway effort, and did not believe in merely trying enough. But when coaching Gianna's team, the greatest challenge for him was not teaching his daughter proper shooting technique, how to read a defense, or how to move without the ball. What troubled him most was how to make Gianna understand that her father's love did not depend on whether she played well or badly. That is the detail that softens the entire image of Kobe. The man who had once turned failure into an obsession, who had pushed himself to the extreme in training because of a few missed shots, wanted his daughter to understand something very different. Before she was a basketball player, she was his daughter. On the court, Kobe could teach Gianna how to fight. But in the role of a father, he had to learn how not to turn love into pressure. To him, what mattered was not only whether she would become a good player, but that she must not confuse achievement with her own worth. Kobe was proud when Gianna began to think like a real player. She did not merely chase the ball. She began to feel the game, began to recognize when she was uncomfortable on the court, began to ask her father, "What is happening? What should I do now?" Those questions perhaps made Kobe happy in a way completely different from trophies. Because their legacy was not passed down through the slogan Mamba Mentality, nor through highlight clips on television. It was passed through small conversations between father and daughter, through the way a father sat down and explained to his daughter how to read a difficult moment. And Gianna was not the only one inspired by Kobe. The girls on her team also saw something special in him. Kobe did not come there as a distant icon. He came as a father, a coach, someone who truly believed that women's basketball deserved attention, respect, and investment with the same serious love. The image of the girl dad, therefore, became a very important part of Kobe's post-retirement chapter. It made the public see him through a softer layer. Not only the cold black Mamba, but a father proud to live inside the world of his daughters. That is why the tragedy of 2020 hurt more than the sudden death of a sports legend. On January 26, 2020, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash in Calabasas, California. On that flight were Gianna and 7 others. They were on their way to a youth basketball event. A detail that makes the pain even harder to bear. Kobe did not leave this world on the way to an NBA game, did not leave amid a glamorous stage, did not leave inside the old chapter of rings and lights. He left while doing the very thing that had come to define the new chapter of his life, walking alongside his daughter. That death cut across many things at once. It cut across Kobe's life when he was only 41 years old, at an age when he had just begun learning how to live outside basketball. It cut across Gianna's dream when she was only 13, when her love for basketball had just begun to bloom under her father's own gaze. It cut across the image of a father who was finding new meaning after leaving the NBA, and it left Vanessa Bryant with a loss that cannot be named in one short sentence, losing her husband and her daughter on the same day. For Natalia, Bianca, and Capri, that tragedy also took away two parts of their family, their father and their sister. For fans, it was the moment when the entire sports world fell silent. But to say only that basketball lost an icon is still not enough. Basketball also lost a chapter that had not yet been written. Kobe as a father, Kobe as a guide for Gianna, Kobe as a man who was transferring his love of basketball from personal glory to the next generation. The most painful thing lies in the unfinishedness. Kobe had spent his entire life controlling every detail on the court. When to accelerate, when to shoot, when to endure pain, when to turn failure into fuel. But the final chapter of his life came from a moment no one could control. There was no final shot to make it right, no overtime, no tomorrow to return to the gym. After Kobe and Gianna were gone, the image of father and daughter sitting together at games, talking about basketball, sharing a private language, became a memory both warm and aching. It made people understand that Kobe's legacy was not only found in 5 rings or extraordinary scoring numbers. That legacy also lived in the way he had begun learning to be a father differently, in the way he saw Gianna, not only as the one who inherited his love for basketball, but first of all as his daughter. Kobe once left the court with the words Mamba out, but his story with Gianna never had such a complete goodbye. It stopped halfway, in the middle of a dream still young, in the middle of a chapter still opening. And it is precisely that unfinishedness that makes the final private chapter of Kobe Bryant's life one of the most painful emotional layers in his entire legacy. Kobe Bryant's legacy cannot be contained only in numbers, even though those numbers are enough to place him among the greats. 20 full years with the Los Angeles Lakers, 5 NBA championships, 18 All-Star selections, 2 Finals MVPs, 1 regular season MVP, the 81-point game against the Toronto Raptors, the 60-point farewell night, and both jersey numbers, 8 and 24, retired forever. But if people only read the resume, they will miss the reason Kobe has lived so long in public memory. What made Kobe different was that he turned basketball into a philosophy of life. Mamba Mentality was not simply the slogan of a player who wanted to win. It was the way Kobe answered every limit. Wake up earlier, train more, study more, ask more, leave nothing unfinished. That is why his influence went beyond the NBA. For many people, Kobe did not only teach how to play basketball, but how to pursue a goal to the very end, even when the price could be extremely harsh. After retirement, Kobe also wanted to prove that his life did not end with the scoreboard. Dear Basketball helped him win an Oscar, opening the image of a storyteller, someone who wanted to turn sports memories into inspiration for the next generation. Through Gianna, he also became a softer symbol of women's basketball and the image of a girl dad. A father who not only passed down his love of basketball to his daughter, but also made many young girls believe that their dreams deserved to be seen. After his death, Kobe was honored in the Hall of Fame, introduced by Michael Jordan as a little brother in basketball, and immortalized by the Lakers with a statue outside their home arena. But his legacy is not a flawless stone statue. It still has difficult areas to speak about, especially the 2003 scandal. That is exactly what makes Kobe's story heavier than an ordinary legend. He was both a symbol of discipline and willpower, and an imperfect human being, with light, darkness, mistakes, and consequences. Kobe Bryant is remembered not because he was perfect, He is remembered because he lived in a way that no one could ignore. Fierce on the court, complicated off it, inspiring millions of people, and leaving behind a question that still echoes after every triumph. How much does a person have to pay to touch greatness? Kobe Bryant is not an easy story to tell. He was the boy who once practiced alone in an empty room, the young man who once threw airballs against Utah, and then turned that embarrassing moment into motivation. The champion beside Shaq, and then the man who had to prove he could still win while standing alone. He had 5 NBA championships, an 81-point game, a 60-point farewell night, and a Mamba mentality that went far beyond basketball. But Kobe was not a perfect icon. He had mistakes, controversies, and cracks that made his legacy far more complicated. That is what makes this story not only about a great athlete, but about a human being who lived to the very edge of both his light and his darkness. After retirement, Kobe began a new chapter, being more present as a father, writing books, telling stories, walking alongside Gianna, and inspiring the younger generation. Then everything stopped too soon in the 2020 helicopter crash. Kobe passed away at only 41 years old, together with his daughter Gianna, leaving behind an unfinished legacy and a grief that fans still cannot forget. Perhaps what keeps Kobe Bryant remembered is not only how many games he won, but the way he makes people ask themselves, have I truly given everything? What moment do you remember Kobe Bryant by the most? The 81-point game, the words Mamba out, the image of him beside Gianna, or his spirit of never living halfway? Leave your comment below, and if you want to see more deep stories about sports and Hollywood icons, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel.